Jamila and Marcus Greene stood frozen at the boarding gate as the white flight attendant smirked. "Your first-class tickets must be fake. People like you don't belong in first class." The siblings' humiliation burned hotter as passengers stared and security approached. Marcus reached for his phone. "I'm calling our father." The attendant laughed. "Sure, call Daddy." Neither she nor the airline executives gathering around could have imagined that within 24 hours, their entire airline would face bankruptcy, lawsuits, and a nationwide boycott that would change the industry forever. What dark secrets was this airline hiding behind its prestigious reputation? Before we dive into this shocking story of discrimination, privilege, and justice, let me know where you're watching from. If you believe in standing up against racism and corporate injustice, hit that like button and subscribe to stay updated on more powerful stories that expose the truth. The Greene siblings grew up in a world of discreet privilege, though few people knew it. Their father, Richard Greene, was the secretive CEO of Green Tech Innovations, a Fortune 500 company that revolutionized renewable energy technology. What almost nobody knew, not even most of the company's own board members, was that Richard was also the silent majority shareholder of SkyNation Airlines, holding 40% of the company's stock through various investment vehicles. Despite their immense wealth, Jamila and Marcus experienced a surprisingly normal upbringing. After their mother died from cancer when they were just 8 and 6 years old, Richard raised them with an unwavering commitment to humility and earned success. "Money can open doors," he would tell them, "but only your character determines whether you deserve to walk through them." This philosophy shaped them into remarkably accomplished young adults. At 26, Jamila was now completing her medical residency at Harvard Medical School, specializing in oncology, a choice influenced by losing her mother. 24-year-old Marcus was in his final year at Stanford Law School, where he'd developed a passion for civil rights law and corporate accountability. Richard's parenting philosophy was unusual for someone of his wealth. While their classmates at private school flaunted designer clothes and luxury cars, the Greene siblings drove modest vehicles and worked summer jobs. "I want you to understand the value of work," Richard explained, "and I want you to know how to connect with people from all walks of life." This approach occasionally made them outsiders among their wealthy peers, but it built character that served them well in adulthood. The siblings had been planning this reunion trip for months, a surprise visit to New York for their father's 60th birthday. They rarely had time together anymore with their demanding schedules on opposite coasts, and this would be their first family vacation in years. The first hint of trouble came when Jamila called to book their first-class tickets. The reservation agent questioned the validity of her credit card 3 times, despite its platinum status. "I just need to verify this is actually your card, ma'am," the agent said with unmistakable skepticism in her voice. "It's unusual to see someone so young with this credit limit." Jamila brushed it off, accustomed to such microaggressions. When Marcus posted about their upcoming vacation on social media, the comment section filled with subtle digs. "First class, must be nice to have handouts," wrote one follower. "Those seats are usually for people who earned them," added another. Marcus deleted the post, reminding himself that their father had taught them to rise above such pettiness. Neither sibling knew that SkyNation Airlines had a history of discrimination complaints that had been quietly settled out of court. Had they known, they might have chosen a different carrier. This detail, buried in legal filings Marcus hadn't yet encountered in his studies, would become crucially important in the days ahead. As they packed their bags with excitement, the siblings coordinated final details for their father's surprise. Jamila prepared a digital album of family photos stretching back to their childhood. Marcus packed something else, a folder of legal documents he'd stumbled across during a case study at Stanford. The file contained concerning information about several airlines' customer service practices, including SkyNation. He'd planned to discuss it with his father after the birthday celebration, unaware of how relevant it would soon become. The night before their departure, Marcus dug deeper into the documents. What he found disturbed him. Internal memos suggesting SkyNation had implemented systematic policies that resulted in discriminatory treatment of minority passengers. The practice appeared to be disguised as customer experience optimization, but the data clearly showed racial disparities in service. Quality, upgrade availability, and complaint resolution. Marcus felt a chill as he reviewed the evidence. This wasn't just bad customer service. It appeared intentional and institutional. He closed the folder, deciding to wait until after their father's birthday to bring up such a troubling topic. The vacation should be a celebration, not marred by corporate ethics discussions. This decision, to temporarily set aside the evidence, would prove fateful in the hours to come. The atmosphere at Los Angeles International Airport pulsed with chaotic energy as Jamila and Marcus navigated the crowded terminal. Holiday travelers packed every corner. Stressed airline staff barked announcements, and security lines snaked beyond view. The siblings arrived 3 hours early, expecting the usual procedures to go smoothly with their pre-check status. Random selection, the TSA agent announced flatly when Marcus approached the security checkpoint, directing him toward a separate area for additional screening. Jamila watched as 3 other black travelers received the same random treatment, while dozens of white passengers proceeded directly through the standard lanes. 7th time this year, Marcus muttered as the agent roughly searched his carry-on. Statistically impossible to be random at this point. A middle-aged white couple behind them in line exchanged glances. If they just follow the rules like everyone else, they wouldn't get stopped, the woman whispered loudly enough to be heard. After clearing security, they headed to Sky Nation's first-class lounge, where they encountered Heather Wilson, the customer service manager whose perfectly pressed navy uniform couldn't mask the coldness in her eyes. Her platinum blonde hair, pulled into a tight bun, she blocked their entrance with practiced efficiency. "Membership cards and boarding passes, please," she demanded, despite having just waved through several other passengers without verification. "We have first-class tickets," Jamila explained, presenting their documentation. Heather examined their passes with exaggerated scrutiny. "These seem unusual. I'll need to see additional identification and the credit card used for purchase." Marcus narrowed his eyes. "You didn't ask anyone else for that?" "It's policy when we notice irregularities," Heather replied with a thin smile. "Just being thorough." The siblings provided the requested identification, aware of the growing line behind them and the uncomfortable stares. Jamila wanted to avoid conflict. Creating a scene would only reinforce negative stereotypes. Marcus, however, quietly opened his phone's recording app, a habit he'd developed after too many similar encounters. A younger flight attendant named Tanya observed the interaction from nearby, discomfort evident on her face. She caught Marcus's eye briefly, her expression apologetic, before quickly looking away. After 15 minutes of verification, a supervisor reluctantly confirmed their ticket's legitimacy. "Everything appears to be in order, Ms. Wilson," he said, handing back their documents. "You're cleared to enter," Heather announced without apology, stepping aside. "Enjoy your wait." The siblings found seats in a quiet corner of the lounge, the brief relief of resolution quickly evaporating when they overheard Heather speaking with a security officer near the entrance. "Keep an eye on those two," she murmured, gesturing subtly in their direction. "They don't fit our typical first-class profile. Potential troublemakers. I've seen this before. They get in here somehow, then cause problems or try to steal." Marcus's jaw tightened as he continued recording, while Jamila placed a restraining hand on his arm. "Not worth it," she whispered. "Let's just have a peaceful trip." But peace was quickly becoming impossible. Have you ever experienced discrimination in a place where you had every right to be? Comment number 1. If you've ever been questioned or made to feel unwelcome simply because of how you look. Comment number 2. If you believe Heather's behavior crosses the line from poor customer service into racial profiling. Hit that like button if you think Marcus was smart to start recording these interactions. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories about standing up against discrimination in everyday situations. The Greene siblings thought getting into the first-class lounge was the hard part, but what awaited them at the boarding gate would make this encounter seem trivial by comparison. Would they make it onto their flight? Or was Sky Nation about to show its true colors in an even more blatant way? And what exactly was in those documents that Marcus discovered? Pre-boarding for Sky Nation Flight 1382 to New York began 30 minutes before scheduled departure. As Jamila and Marcus approached the priority boarding lane, they felt the weight of stares from fellow first-class passengers, executives in tailored suits, checking watches worth more than many people's monthly salary, giving the siblings sidelong glances of suspicion and disapproval. Behind the counter, the flight crew whispered among themselves, occasionally looking in the siblings' direction. Heather Wilson had made a point of walking briskly from the lounge to the gate ahead of them, and now stood conferring with the gate agents, periodically glancing toward the Greenes. "She's alerting them about us," Jamila muttered. Marcus nodded. "And look over there. She's talking to TSA too." Indeed, Heather had pulled aside a TSA agent, gesturing in their direction while speaking urgently. The agent's hand moved to his radio as he assessed the siblings from a distance. When first-class boarding was announced, Jamila and Marcus stepped forward with the other premium passengers. The gate agent, whose name tag read David, looked at their boarding passes and frowned. "Could you step aside, please? I need to verify these tickets." Marcus kept his voice steady. "They've already been verified twice, once at check-in and again at the lounge." "I need to check them again," David insisted loudly, drawing attention from nearby passengers. "We've had issues with fraudulent tickets recently." Jamila handed over her boarding pass and ID. "Is there a problem with our specific tickets, or are you checking everyone's?" David ignored her question, instead announcing even more loudly, "How exactly did you obtain these first-class tickets?" The siblings were now the center of attention. Other passengers paused their conversations to watch. Marcus calmly removed his phone and began recording again. "We purchased them legitimately, just like everyone else," he stated clearly for the recording. "This is the third verification we've been subjected to. No other passengers are receiving this level of scrutiny." Heather stepped forward. "Sir, recording is not permitted in the boarding area." "Actually," Marcus replied, "according to Sky Nation's own published policies, recording is permitted in all public areas of the terminal. This is not a secured zone." A few passengers in line began murmuring. An older white woman shook her head. "Just show them what they need so we can all board," she complained. But others seemed troubled by the unfolding discrimination. A middle-aged Asian man in a business suit spoke up. "I didn't have to verify my ticket again. Why are they being singled out?" David and Heather exchanged glances. "Sir, this is an airline security matter," Heather responded to the businessman. "Please mind your own boarding process." As more passengers grew restless, the situation intensified. David stepped from behind the counter and physically positioned himself to block the siblings from the boarding lane. "Until we can fully verify these tickets and address the security concerns, you won't be boarding this aircraft." "What security concerns?" Jamila demanded. "We've done nothing wrong." Other staff members now moved to support David and Heather, creating a human barrier between the siblings and the jet bridge. Marcus continued recording, his law school training evident in his methodical documentation of every word and action. The gate area had become divided. Some passengers openly supported the discrimination, while others looked uncomfortable or outraged. Phones emerged from several bystanders who began recording the confrontation. A final boarding call came over the loudspeaker, but Heather made a swift decision. She grabbed the microphone and announced to the entire gate area, "Attention passengers of Flight 11382 to New York. We're experiencing a brief security delay. We have identified tickets that have been flagged in our system, and we're working to resolve this situation." The implication was clear to everyone. The black passengers with first-class tickets were being publicly labeled as security threats. "This is unacceptable," Marcus stated firmly. "You have verified our identities repeatedly. You know our tickets are legitimate. This is textbook discrimination." Heather's face hardened. "Your tickets are being revoked due to security concerns. You will not be traveling on this flight today." Two burly airport security officers approached within moments of Heather's announcement, their hands resting casually near their weapons. The confrontation had escalated from discriminatory customer service to a potentially dangerous situation in mere minutes. These individuals were becoming aggressive at the gate, Heather informed the officers loudly enough for nearby passengers to hear. "They've been threatening our staff and refusing to comply with security procedures." Jamila gasped at the blatant lie. "That's absolutely false. We've been completely calm and cooperative despite being repeatedly harassed." Marcus kept his phone recording but positioned himself slightly in front of his sister. We have not raised our voices or made any threats. We've simply asked to board with the tickets we legally purchased. One of the security officers, a heavyset man with a crew cut, reached for Marcus's phone. You need to stop recording now. I have the legal right to record in this public area, Marcus responded calmly. And I strongly suggest you note the security cameras overhead that are capturing this entire interaction. He pointed upward to the black domes mounted in the ceiling. Jamila noticed several passengers had their phones out, filming the confrontation from different angles. An elderly black woman shook her head sadly. A young white couple looked outraged, the woman openly crying at the scene unfolding before them. Last chance, Heather announced with smug authority. You can leave the boarding area voluntarily, or you'll be removed and possibly arrested for creating a disturbance. Creating a disturbance? Jamila repeated incredulously. By attempting to use our valid tickets? The second security officer, younger than his partner, seemed uncomfortable with the situation, but remained professional. Sir, ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to come with us. Heather stepped closer, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. Get lost or get arrested. Your choice. The first security officer reached for Marcus's carry-on bag, inadvertently shoving him in the process. The crowd gasped at the physical contact. Do not touch me, Marcus stated firmly. We have not committed any crime or violation. The confrontation had drawn a substantial crowd. Some passengers had missed their own boarding calls to witness the unfolding discrimination. A few had approached airline staff to protest the treatment, only to be dismissed. Marcus made eye contact with his sister. They had discussed situations like this before, how to respond if they ever faced blatant discrimination. They had strategies, phrases to use, ways to de-escalate while standing their ground. But this was beyond anything they'd prepared for. I'm calling our father, Marcus said quietly to Jamila. Is that really necessary? She whispered back. Their father had always encouraged them to handle their own battles, to not rely on his name or influence. Yes, Marcus replied, pulling out his phone while still recording with the other. This has gone too far. Sure, call Daddy, Heather mocked, overhearing their exchange. See if he can help you now. Marcus dialed, put the phone on speaker. As it rang twice, then a deep voice answered. Marcus, everything okay? Dad, Jamila and I are at LAX, being denied boarding on SkyNation Flight 1382 despite having valid first-class tickets. We're being threatened with arrest for attempting to use our tickets. They're treating us like criminals. There was a brief silence on the line. The entire gate area seemed to hold its breath. Put me on speaker, Richard Greene said, his voice unnervingly calm. Marcus held up the phone. You're on speaker, Dad. Who is the supervisor there? Richard asked. Heather stepped forward confidently. This is Customer Service Manager Heather Wilson. Sir, your children have been… Ms. Wilson, Richard interrupted with chilling composure. Do not move my children from that spot. I'll handle this personally. Marcus, Jamila, don't move, no matter what they say or do. Before Heather could respond, the call ended. Well, that was dramatic, she smirked, though a flicker of uncertainty crossed her face. But we have procedures to follow. Officers, please escort these individuals to the security office. Despite their father's instruction, the siblings found themselves physically surrounded. The officers didn't grab them, but made it clear they had no choice. As they were escorted away from the gate, passengers continued recording. Someone shouted, I've got it all on video. This is wrong. Marcus locked eyes with a young woman who was filming. SkyNation Airlines, December 12th, Flight 1382 to New York, he called out clearly. Please post what you've witnessed. As they were marched through the terminal under escort, treated like criminals for simply existing in first-class space, neither sibling could have predicted how dramatically their lives, and the entire airline industry, were about to change. The sterile walls of the airport security office felt oppressive as Jamila and Marcus sat on hard plastic chairs, their belongings placed on a metal table for inspection. Two officers stood guard while a third rifled through their carry-ons, with theatrical thoroughness. Hand over your phones, demanded the crew-cut officer who had shoved Marcus earlier. I decline, Marcus responded calmly. There is no legal basis for you to confiscate our personal property. We have not been arrested or charged with any crime. The officer stepped forward threateningly. Airport security protocol gives me the authority to ensure passenger safety, yes, Marcus interrupted, but not to illegally detain law-abiding citizens or seize their property without cause. I'm a law student at Stanford, and I assure you that you're venturing into unlawful detention territory. The younger officer shifted uncomfortably, clearly concerned about the legal implications Marcus raised. Jamila maintained her composure, though her medical training made her acutely aware of her elevated heart rate and the adrenaline flooding her system. We've complied with every legitimate request. We've shown our IDs multiple times. We've remained calm despite being publicly humiliated and physically removed from the gate. What exactly are we being detained for? Before anyone could answer, the door burst open. A man in an expensive suit entered, his face ashen. "Which one of you is in charge here?" he demanded, looking between the officers. "I am," answered the senior officer. "And you are?" "Robert Chen, airport director." He barely acknowledged the officers, his attention immediately turning to the siblings. "Are you Jamila and Marcus Greene?" They nodded, exchanging confused glances. "I need everyone else out of this room immediately," Chen ordered. When the officers hesitated, he added, "Now, this is a direct order." As the room cleared, Chen closed the door and turned to the siblings. "I deeply apologize for this situation. We've just received word that a VIP is en route to the airport specifically regarding your case. I need to understand exactly what happened." "Who's coming?" Jamila asked. Chen checked his watch nervously. "I'm not at liberty to say, but they'll be here within 15 minutes. In the meantime, Ms. Wilson has been summoned to my office. Can you tell me your version of events?" Marcus described their experience in detail, while Jamila noted how the airport director grew increasingly distressed with each revelation. "This is unacceptable," Chen muttered, making furious notes on his tablet. "Completely unacceptable." For 30 minutes, the siblings waited alone in the security office, the atmosphere shifting from hostility to an eerie anticipation. Outside, they could hear increased activity, urgent voices, the crackle of security radios. The door finally opened again, revealing a sight that stunned them both. Their father, Richard Greene, flanked by 4 impeccably dressed men and women carrying briefcases, clearly high-powered attorneys. "Dad?" Jamila stood shocked. "How did you get here so fast?" Richard embraced his children before answering. "I was already in LA for meetings. My helicopter landed 10 minutes ago." He examined them both carefully. "Are you hurt?" "We're fine," Marcus assured him. "Just angry and humiliated." Richard's normally warm eyes had turned to steel. "I understand." He turned to his legal team. "Get their statements. Document everything." To his children, he added, "I need to step out for a moment. These are my personal attorneys. Tell them everything." As Richard left, one of the lawyers explained, "Your father has demanded an emergency meeting with Sky Nation executives. They're assembling in the airport's executive boardroom as we speak." "What's happening?" Marcus asked. The attorney smiled, grimly. "Ms. Wilson has just discovered who you are, or more specifically, who your father is." "Dad doesn't usually use his position like this," Jamila said quietly. "This isn't about using position," the lawyer replied. "This is about addressing a systemic problem your father has suspected for some time. You two inadvertently provided the evidence he needed." 20 minutes later, Richard returned, his expression unreadable. "The Sky Nation CEO and executive team are waiting. Would you join us?" As they walked through the airport's private corridors, Richard explained in a low voice, "I own 40% of Sky Nation's shares through various holdings. I've been investigating discrimination complaints against them for months, but couldn't get solid evidence. Until today." He stopped before opening the boardroom door. "I'm calling an emergency board meeting, effective immediately. The future of this airline will be decided in the next hour. Have you ever witnessed someone completely underestimate the consequences of their discriminatory actions? Comment number 1 if you think Heather Wilson had no idea who she was messing with. Comment number 2: if you believe corporations should face serious consequences for allowing discrimination. Hit the like button if you're enjoying seeing justice about to be served. And don't forget to subscribe to see more stories of people standing up against discrimination in powerful ways. What do you think will happen in that boardroom? Will Sky Nation executives try to dismiss this as an isolated incident? And what kind of evidence has Richard Greene been gathering about the airline's practices? The power dynamic has completely shifted, but the fight for justice is only beginning. The boardroom fell silent as the Greene family entered. Around an imposing mahogany table sat 8 Sky Nation executives, their expressions ranging from confusion to outright fear. At the head of the table, CEO William Parker stood to greet them, with a forced smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Richard, this is quite a surprise. We had no idea you were—" "Save it, Bill," Richard interrupted coldly. "You know exactly who I am. You've cashed my investment checks for years. What you didn't know was that my children would be victimized by your airline's discriminatory practices." Heather Wilson sat near the far end, her face drained of color. The confident airport tyrant had vanished, replaced by someone who clearly realized her career was hanging by a thread. Richard nodded to his legal team, who distributed folders to everyone present. "These are recordings and transcripts of what happened today. I'd like you all to review them before we continue." For several uncomfortable minutes, only the sound of turning pages filled the room. Jamila watched the executives' faces as they reviewed the evidence. Some looked genuinely shocked, others defensive, a few calculating. When they finished, Richard spoke again. "This incident is not isolated. Marcus opened his laptop and connected it to the room's projection system. During a case study at Stanford Law, I discovered these internal documents. The screen filled with Sky Nation memos, training materials, and customer service protocols. These show a pattern of systematically discriminatory practices dating back at least 5 years. These documents were obtained illegally," protested Elaine Frost, Sky Nation's legal counsel. "They can't be used in any legal proceeding." "They weren't obtained illegally," Marcus countered. "They were submitted as evidence in Johnson v. Air West last year and became public record. Sky Nation was not a defendant in that case, but was referenced in discovery documents." Richard continued, "I've been quietly investigating discrimination, claims against Sky Nation for months. When I heard what happened to my children today, I knew it was time to act." Heather finally spoke up, her voice quavering. "Mr. Greene, this was a misunderstanding, not discrimination. Your children seemed suspicious because they're black?" Jamila interrupted. "Please explain exactly what made us suspicious while trying to use legally purchased first-class tickets." Heather stammered. "It wasn't about race. We have protocols for identifying potential issues with—" "We have the recordings, Ms. Wilson," Marcus cut in sharply. "You specifically told security to watch us because we don't fit the first-class profile. You questioned our tickets 3 separate times when no one else's were questioned once. You threatened us with arrest for attempting to board our flight." CEO Parker interjected. "Richard, I assure you this doesn't reflect our company values. Ms. Wilson's actions were her own, and we'll address them appropriately. We can offer compensation for your children's distress and—" "This isn't about compensation," Richard stated firmly. "This is about a pattern of behavior that's been allowed to flourish under your leadership." He turned to Marcus. "Show them the historical data." Marcus displayed a series of charts and figures. "These are all complaints filed against Sky Nation for discriminatory treatment over the past decade. 87% were dismissed without investigation. Of those investigated, 93% were resolved with minimal settlements, accompanied by non-disclosure agreements." The executives exchanged nervous glances as the magnitude of the situation became clear. Parker tried again. "Richard, we can resolve this quietly. A generous settlement, policy changes, whatever you think is appropriate." Richard consulted briefly with his children and attorneys, their whispered conversation tense but unified. When he turned back to the executives, his decision was clear. "Here's what's going to happen. I'm rejecting any settlement offer that includes NDAs. My family won't be silenced. We're going public with everything, Today's incident, the historical pattern, all of it. You can't do that, Parker protested. The stock price will plummet. The reputation damage would be deserved, Richard finished for him. Companies that allow discrimination should face consequences. The rest of the meeting detailed Richard's demands: Heather's immediate termination, a complete overhaul of customer service policies, an independent audit of all discrimination complaints, and substantial compensation for past victims. As they left the boardroom, Jamila asked her father, "Are you sure about going public? This could affect your business relationships." Richard put his arm around his daughter's shoulders. "Some things are more important than business, Jamila. This is about justice, not just for you two, but for everyone who's been mistreated and had no power to fight back." Marcus added, "And we have evidence that will be impossible to dismiss. This isn't just our word against theirs." That evening, in Richard's downtown Los Angeles office, the family gathered with their communications team to craft their strategy. While they hadn't planned to spend their reunion this way, there was something powerful about fighting together for something that mattered. The videos from other passengers are already spreading on social media, a communications specialist reported. "We've been contacted by 3 major news networks wanting interviews." Richard looked at his children. "This is your experience. You should decide how public to make this." Jamila and Marcus exchanged a glance, their decision already made. "We're taking this all the way," Marcus said firmly. "Sky Nation needs to be held accountable, and the public deserves to know the truth." As night fell over Los Angeles, none of them could have predicted just how powerfully their stand would resonate, or how desperately their opponents would fight back. By sunrise the following morning, the incident had ignited across social media. Smartphone videos captured by fellow passengers had accumulated millions of views overnight. The hashtag Sky Nation Racism trended nationally, accompanied by hundreds of similar stories from other travelers who had experienced discrimination on Sky Nation flights. Major news networks led their morning broadcasts with footage of the Greene siblings being escorted away by security, contrasted with images of Richard Greene, now identified as a major shareholder in the airline, arriving at LAX via helicopter to intervene. Sky Nation's corporate communications team scrambled to control the damage, issuing a tepid statement. Sky Nation Airlines is aware of the incident involving 2 passengers at Los Angeles International Airport. We take all customer concerns seriously and are investigating the matter. The employee in question has been placed on administrative leave pending review. The statement only fueled public outrage. Comments flooded Sky Nation's social media accounts. Investigating clear discrimination caught on video from multiple angles? What exactly needs investigation? Placed on administrative leave means paid vacation while this blows over. Not I. Good enough. Former Sky Nation flight attendant here. This is just the tip of the iceberg. The corporate culture encourages this behavior. That last comment came from Tanya Williams, the sympathetic flight attendant who had witnessed the initial confrontation. Her post quickly went viral, leading to a morning television interview where she revealed more details about the airline's internal practices. Flight attendants were trained to give extra attention to certain passengers and less to others, Tanya explained on national television. They never explicitly mentioned race, but the examples they used in training made it clear who they considered premium customers versus who was likely to cause problems. It was coded language for racial profiling. When asked why she hadn't spoken up before, Tanya's answer resonated with viewers. "I needed my job, but seeing what happened to the Greene siblings, how blatant it was, I can't stay silent anymore." By midday, Sky Nation's stock had dropped 18%. Investment analysts issued warnings about potential long-term damage to the company's reputation and financial health. As the story gained momentum, more former employees came forward. A former gate agent revealed that staff received bonuses for maintaining customer satisfaction scores that were heavily weighted toward feedback from white, male business travelers. A baggage handler described witnessing systematic extra screening of luggage belonging to passengers with foreign-sounding names. The airline attempted damage control by scheduling CEO William Parker for a primetime interview. The decision would prove disastrous. "While we regret any misunderstanding that occurred," Parker stated stiffly to the camera, "we need to consider whether this incident is being blown out of proportion. Ms. Wilson has served our airline faithfully for 15 years, with no previous complaints." When the interviewer pointed out that numerous complaints had actually been filed against Wilson, but dismissed without investigation, Parker appeared flustered. "We have to question the timing of this," he continued, digging himself deeper. "Mr. Greene is a major shareholder currently involved in a proxy fight for board seats. One has to wonder if this entire incident was staged to gain leverage." The insinuation that the Greene siblings had somehow orchestrated their own discrimination sparked immediate backlash. Within hours, the hashtag #OurBoycottSkyNation began trending, with travelers posting screenshots of canceled reservations and cut-up frequent flyer cards. As the media firestorm intensified, so did the personal attacks. Conservative commentators questioned why the Greenes were playing the race card when they clearly came from privilege. Tabloids dug into Jamila's and Marcus's personal lives, publishing unflattering photos from college parties and speculating about their relationships. Reporters camped outside their homes and workplaces. Jamila arrived at the hospital for her shift to find journalists trying to interview her patients about her character. Marcus's law school classmates were offered money for any dirt on his past. The siblings' phones buzzed constantly with notifications, some supportive, but others containing vile racist threats. After Marcus received a particularly graphic death threat, they relocated to one of their father's secure properties and hired additional security. What had begun as discrimination at an airport gate had exploded into a national conversation about race, privilege, accountability, and corporate culture, with the Greene family at its center. Richard called a family meeting to check in with his children. "This is getting intense," he acknowledged. "We can still settle privately if you want to step back from the spotlight." Jamila and Marcus both shook their heads. "Too many people have come forward now," Jamila said. "They're sharing their stories because we shared ours. We can't back down," Marcus agreed. "Besides, we're just getting started. The documents I have are just the beginning. There's something much bigger hiding in SkyNation systems, and I intend to find it." 3 days after the incident, an anonymous email arrived in Marcus's inbox. "I work in SkyNation's IT department," it read. "What happened to you was wrong. You should see these files." Attached were dozens of internal documents with a message: "Algorithms don't lie." Marcus forwarded the files to his father's cybersecurity team to verify their authenticity before opening them. The confirmation came back quickly. These were genuine SkyNation documents, and they contained explosive information. The whistleblower had provided the airline's proprietary customer service software documentation. Buried in technical specifications was an algorithmic system called Customer Experience Optimization that automatically flagged certain passengers for different treatment levels. "Dad, Jamila, you need to see this," Marcus called, spreading the documents across the conference table at Richard's office. They built discrimination into their software. The siblings and their father pored over the technical documentation, growing increasingly disturbed by what they found. "Look at these parameters," Jamila pointed to a section of code. "They're using proxies for race without explicitly saying it, names associated with certain ethnicities, zip codes from predominantly minority neighborhoods, even which flights passengers typically book." Marcus nodded grimly. "The algorithm assigns a premium experience score that determines everything from how likely you are to be upgraded to how quickly your complaints get addressed." Richard studied the formulas. "They've created plausible deniability. No single factor explicitly mentions race, but the combined effect is undeniable discrimination." As they dug deeper, they discovered training materials instructing customer service representatives how to interpret and act on these scores without explicitly mentioning their discriminatory basis. The next morning, their legal team confirmed that the leaked documents would be admissible in court. Hours later, 2 more SkyNation employees contacted them, offering to testify about how these systems worked in practice. Meanwhile, the airline's leadership was fracturing. Anonymous sources reported heated board meetings, with some executives pushing for substantial reforms, while others insisted on fighting the allegations. The crisis escalated when a tech blog published an exposé featuring interviews with former Sky Nation developers who had worked on the algorithm. They revealed that the system had been deliberately designed to identify and prioritize certain customers over others, with race as an unspoken but understood factor. "We were told to optimize for high-value customers and reduce resources allocated to low-value segments," one former developer explained. "When we ran the data, it was obvious these were code words for white and non-white passengers." Sky Nation's response was swift and aggressive. They fired the whistleblowers they could identify and threatened legal action against the tech blog for publishing proprietary information. They hired a crisis management firm that began attacking the credibility of former employees, dismissing them as disgruntled and unqualified to understand complex algorithms. Then came the most damning revelation: emails between Sky Nation executives discussing the customer optimization system in explicitly racial terms, followed by instructions to clean up the language before wider distribution. "We need to ensure premium customers don't feel their experience is diminished by increased diversity in our cabins," wrote one executive. "The algorithm helps us maintain the right balance without creating legal exposure." In response to these leaks, Sky Nation began an internal witch hunt, pulling employees into interrogation-style meetings to find the sources. They also accelerated efforts to modify or destroy the incriminating algorithms, actions that would later constitute evidence. Tampering. Jamila, Marcus, and Richard filed a formal discrimination lawsuit, seeking class action status on behalf of all passengers who had experienced similar treatment. The court filing made public all the evidence they had gathered, creating another media firestorm. Sky Nation's stock plummeted another 25%. Partner airlines began distancing themselves. Corporate clients announced they were reviewing their travel contracts. In a desperate move to contain the damage, Sky Nation offered the Greene family an enormous settlement, $50 million in exchange for signing non-disclosure agreements and dropping the lawsuit. "It's a lot of money," Jamila acknowledged as they discussed the offer. "That's exactly why they're offering it," Marcus replied. "They're terrified of what will happen if this goes to trial." Richard considered the offer thoughtfully. "We don't need the money, but we could use it to establish a foundation for victims of discrimination. That might do more good than a lengthy court battle." The siblings weighed their options, considering both the potential impact of public proceedings versus what they could accomplish with targeted funding. Their deliberation was interrupted by breaking news. FBI agents had entered Sky Nation headquarters with warrants related to evidence tampering and obstruction of justice. During their search, they discovered something even more shocking. The discriminatory algorithm wasn't limited to customer service. It also affected hiring, promotion, and vendor selection throughout the company. In their most alarming discovery yet, Marcus found code documentation revealing the algorithm specifically identified passengers with African American associated names and systematically downgraded their service priority. This wasn't just institutional bias, it was deliberate, encoded discrimination. Can you believe how deep this discrimination went? Comment number 1. If you're shocked that a major airline would build racism directly into their algorithms. Comment number 2. If you think more companies should be investigated for similar hidden practices. Hit that like button if you're amazed at how thoroughly these siblings exposed corporate wrongdoing. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories about fighting systemic injustice. What would you do if offered $50 million to keep quiet about discrimination? Should the Greene family settle and use the money for good, or should they push for a public trial to expose everything? And with the FBI now involved, how will the airline executives try to save themselves? The story is about to take an even more dramatic turn. The morning after the FBI raid on Sky Nation headquarters, Jamila walked to her car in the hospital parking garage after a grueling overnight shift. Exhaustion had temporarily dulled her vigilance. She didn't notice the 3 figures lurking behind a concrete pillar until she was halfway to her vehicle. "That's her," a voice hissed. "The troublemaker who's ruining everything." Jamila froze, keys clutched in her hand, assessing her options as 3 men approached. Their faces contorted with rage. They wore Sky Nation employee badges on lanyards around their necks. "Do you know how many people are losing their jobs because of you?" one demanded, stepping closer. My wife is pregnant. I have a mortgage. I understand you're angry, Jamila said calmly, backing toward her car while reaching for her phone. But this isn't about jobs. It's about treating people equally. Equality? Another spat. You rich kids playing victim while destroying an entire company? The third man lunged forward unexpectedly, grabbing her arm. Let's see how you like being treated. Jamila's medical training kicked in. She struck precisely at the pressure point in his wrist, breaking his grip. As the men advanced again, security cameras swiveled in their direction, and the garage's emergency alarm began blaring. The men fled as hospital security approached, but the message was clear. The backlash had turned dangerous. This wasn't the first threat. That morning, Jamila had found her car vandalized, racial slurs spray-painted across the hood and tires, slashed. The words "race traitor" had been carved into the paint. At the hospital, colleagues who had once been friendly now kept their distance. Some openly questioned her motives. You realize you're feeding into a victim narrative, one senior doctor commented during rounds. Some people think you're just playing the race card for attention. Marcus faced similar escalation. Twice in the past week, he'd noticed the same unmarked sedan following him from campus. His apartment building's security system had captured footage of two men attempting to pick his lock while he was in class. Campus police now escorted him between buildings. At home that evening, the siblings compared notes with their father. It's getting worse, Marcus acknowledged, showing them a stack of threatening letters. These came to my department office. Richard looked grim. I've had concerning developments too. He revealed that he'd been hospitalized briefly the previous night with chest pains after receiving threatening calls targeting his children. The doctors say it was stress-induced, not a heart attack. Dad! Jamila immediately switched to physician mode, checking his pulse. Why didn't you tell us? I didn't want to worry you, Richard said, but we need to take these threats seriously. Our legal team has received intimidation attempts. Someone threatened their families if they continue representing us. The most alarming development came from Tanya Williams, the whistleblower flight attendant. She called in a panic to report that Heather Wilson had approached her in a parking lot. She told me I'd regret opening my mouth and that accidents happen to people who don't know when to shut up. Tanya reported, her voice shaking. She mentioned knowing where my son goes to school. The Greene family moved quickly to protect themselves and their allies. They hired former FBI agents as security consultants, moved to a secure compound outside the city, changed their routines, and installed advanced monitoring systems. Jamila arranged leaves of absence for herself and key witnesses who worked at the hospital. Marcus attended classes remotely. Their attorneys worked from undisclosed locations. Despite these precautions, the danger escalated further. An unknown assailant ambushed Jamila in the hospital parking garage during a brief visit to check on patients. Only the timely intervention of security prevented what could have been a serious assault. The FBI, now investigating potential witness intimidation, assigned agents to monitor the family and key witnesses. Analysis of the threats revealed they weren't random. They followed professional patterns, suggesting a coordinated campaign. Someone with resources is organizing this, Marcus concluded during a security briefing. These aren't just angry employees acting independently. Evidence of tampering appeared in their case files. Critical documents went missing from supposedly secure servers. Witness statements were altered, and someone attempted to plant manufactured evidence that would discredit their claims. When a forensic analysis traced some of the digital tampering to Sky Nation executive offices, the case took on new dimensions. This wasn't just about discrimination anymore. It was about criminal conspiracy, witness intimidation, and obstruction of justice. The pressure was taking its toll on everyone. Richard's doctor warned that his stress levels remained dangerously high. Jamila struggled with anxiety, jumping at shadows. Marcus barely slept, spending nights reviewing evidence and preparing legal strategies. Maybe we should consider their settlement offer, Jamila suggested, during a particularly difficult night after learning that another whistleblower had withdrawn their testimony following threats. Not for the money, but for everyone's safety. Marcus shook his head firmly. That's exactly what they want, to scare us into silence. If we back down, nothing changes. The next family won't have our resources or platform to fight back. Richard, who had been quietly listening, finally spoke. This has become something bigger than us. It's not just about one incident anymore. It's about standing against a system that's hurt countless people. He looked at his children with fierce pride. But this has to be your decision. You're the ones who experienced this directly. The siblings exchanged a long look, 15 years of shared experiences and values passing between them in silent communication. We continue, they said in unison. The federal courthouse buzzed with tension as the preliminary hearing for Greene versus SkyNation Airlines commenced. Media trucks surrounded the building, and protesters from both sides lined the streets, some supporting the family's fight against discrimination, others accusing them of destroying jobs and playing the race card. Judge Eleanor Martinez, known for her no-nonsense approach to high-profile cases, studied the initial evidence with a critical eye. I've reviewed the materials, submitted by both parties, she announced to the packed courtroom. The evidence of systemic discrimination is concerning enough to warrant proceeding to discovery. SkyNation's defense strategy became immediately clear. Their legal team, led by renowned attorney James Westbrook, attacked the Greenes' motives, rather than addressing the evidence. Your Honor, this case represents a cynical abuse of the court system, Westbrook argued smoothly. Richard Greene, as a major shareholder engaged in a proxy fight for control of SkyNation, orchestrated this entire controversy to devalue the company and seize control at a discount. The judge's expression remained neutral. Do you have evidence supporting this allegation, Counselor? We intend to demonstrate through discovery that Mr. Greene has been planning this takeover for months, using his own children as unwitting pawns in a corporate game. Marcus, representing himself with assistance from their legal team, rose to respond. Your Honor, SkyNation's conspiracy theory conveniently ignores documented evidence of discrimination that predates our incident by years. We have testimony from 17 former employees describing systematic mistreatment of minority passengers. As if on cue, the courtroom doors opened to admit a harried-looking woman who rushed to whisper in Marcus's ear. He nodded grimly before addressing the court again. Additionally, Your Honor, we've just learned that Heather Wilson has been contacting our witnesses, making threats if they testify. We're filing a motion for witness protection and requesting a restraining order. The judge's expression hardened. Mr. Westbrook, is your client intimidating witnesses? Absolutely not, Your Honor. These allegations are... We have recordings, Marcus interrupted, sliding a thumb drive across to the court clerk. Ms. Wilson explicitly threatens former employee Tanya Williams and mentions her child's school. The FBI has been notified. This revelation set the tone for the proceedings to follow. As discovery progressed, hundreds of past victims of SkyNation discrimination came forward to join the lawsuit, which had now been certified as a class action. What began as a case about two siblings denied boarding had expanded to include passengers who had been repeatedly randomly selected for additional screening, wheelchair users whose equipment had been damaged without compensation, and numerous travelers who had faced unexplained service downgrades or denial of assistance. The Federal Aviation Administration launched its own investigation into SkyNation's practices, with preliminary findings suggesting that similar issues might exist throughout the industry. Several other airlines preemptively announced reviews of their own customer service algorithms and training procedures. SkyNation's financial situation deteriorated rapidly. Major shareholders began selling their stakes, perceiving the company as toxic. Corporate clients canceled contracts, unwilling to associate with an airline facing discrimination allegations. Passenger bookings plummeted by 60% as the boycott gained momentum. Desperate to stem the bleeding, SkyNation's board authorized a massive settlement offer, $200 million plus comprehensive policy changes, but requiring all parties to sign strict non-disclosure agreements. The Greene family faced their most difficult decision yet. $200 million could fund remarkable initiatives for racial justice. It could establish scholarships, support civil rights organizations, and help thousands of people. The NDA requirement, however, would bury the truth about Sky Nation's practices. "It's an impossible choice," Jamila said during their strategy session. "That money could do so much good." "But at what cost?" Marcus countered. "If we sign NDAs, the public never learns the full truth. Other companies keep doing the same thing, just more carefully." Richard, who had been quietly listening, finally spoke. "What if we counteroffer? We accept a reduced settlement but refuse the NDAs. Complete transparency." Their attorneys were skeptical. "They'll never agree. The whole point of offering this much money is to buy silence." The family's deliberation was interrupted by breaking news. Heather Wilson had been arrested by the FBI. In an elaborate sting operation, agents had recorded her attempting to bribe a key witness to change their testimony. The witness, Tanya Williams, had cooperated with authorities, wearing a wire during the exchange. This development shifted the dynamics dramatically. With criminal charges now in play, Sky Nation faced not just civil liability, but potential criminal conspiracy charges. The airline's board of directors called an emergency session that lasted through the night. By morning, their decision was clear. Sky Nation would fight to the bitter end, believing that settlement now would be perceived as an admission of criminal guilt. What they didn't know was that Marcus had uncovered the smoking gun, the original algorithm design documents containing comments from programmers questioning the legality of what they were being asked to build, alongside responses from executives explicitly directing them to continue development while cleaning up the language. To avoid legal issues, the algorithm had been intentionally designed to identify and downgrade service for passengers of color while maintaining plausible deniability. There was nothing ambiguous about it. This was deliberate, encoded discrimination. When these documents were submitted to the court, Sky Nation's case began to collapse. Sky Nation's corporate structure unraveled with stunning speed in the wake of the algorithm revelations. The board of directors' emergency meeting lasted 36 hours as members turned on each other, each trying to distance themselves from the discrimination policies. By morning, 4 board members had resigned, issuing statements claiming they had been misled about company practices and were appalled by these revelations. Their carefully worded press releases couldn't disguise the obvious attempt to escape a sinking ship. The Department of Justice announced a civil rights investigation into Sky Nation's practices, with the Attorney General making a rare personal statement. "Discrimination encoded into algorithms is still discrimination. We will pursue this case wherever it leads us, regardless of corporate power or influence." The airline industry, recognizing the existential threat posed by this case, began proactive reforms. Major carriers announced independent audits of their customer service practices, algorithm reviews, and enhanced discrimination training. Industry groups proposed new accountability standards and third-party oversight mechanisms. For Sky Nation, these developments came too late. The company's stock continued its freefall, losing 80% of its value since the incident. Major creditors called loans, triggering liquidity crises. Bankruptcy loomed as unavoidable. Heather Wilson, facing multiple federal charges including witness tampering and obstruction of justice, attempted to negotiate a plea deal by providing evidence against her superiors. Her testimony revealed a culture of discrimination that extended far beyond customer service into hiring, promotion, and vendor selection. The public apologies to the Greene siblings began, first from former board members trying to salvage their reputations, then from executives seeking leniency. These carefully crafted statements rang hollow, transparent attempts at damage control rather than genuine remorse. The technology community responded with outrage to the exposed algorithm. Leading AI ethics researchers published analyses of the discriminatory code, using it as a case study in algorithmic bias. Several prominent engineers who had previously worked for Sky Nation publicly apologized for their unwitting contributions to discriminatory systems. As evidence of deliberate discrimination mounted, the airline's legal defense crumbled. Their attorneys withdrew specific claims and objections, focusing increasingly on limiting damages rather than denying responsibility. Throughout this period, the Greene family continued receiving threats, though their frequency decreased as Sky Nation executives focused on their own legal jeopardy. The FBI's involvement had created a powerful deterrent, with several individuals already facing charges for witness intimidation. The family's security situation stabilized enough for them to resume modified versions of their normal activities. Jamila returned to limited hospital duties with security escorts. Marcus participated in selected law school functions while continuing to prepare their case. Richard maintained a strategic silence throughout this period, declining interview requests and avoiding public statements. Behind the scenes, however, he was executing a carefully planned strategy that had been developing for months before the incident. Working with institutional investors and anti-discrimination advocacy groups, Richard quietly accumulated additional Sky Nation stock as prices plummeted. When his holdings reached 49%, he announced his intention to purchase remaining shares and take the company private, a hostile takeover leveraging the crisis he had helped expose. The announcement sent shockwaves through the business community. Financial analysts couldn't decide if this represented a brilliant strategic move or a personal vendetta. Industry observers questioned whether Richard intended to rehabilitate the airline or dismantle it completely. At a hastily organized press conference, the remaining Sky Nation executives fought desperately to block the takeover, appealing to regulators and shareholders. Their efforts gained little traction as Richard revealed his ultimate plan: not to destroy the airline, but to transform it into an industry model for equity and accountability. This company failed not because it faced discrimination claims, but because discrimination was built into its fundamental operating procedures, Richard explained to shareholders. I intend to demonstrate that ethical practices and profitability can coexist, that treating all customers with dignity isn't just morally right, but good business. The transformation had begun, but the most dramatic revelations, and Richard's true motivations, remained to be unveiled. 6 months after the boarding gate incident, Sky Nation Airlines operated under entirely new leadership. Richard Greene had completed his takeover, installing a diverse executive team led by CEO Tanya Williams, the former flight attendant whose whistleblowing had helped expose the discrimination. The company had emerged from bankruptcy restructuring with a revolutionary approach to equality and customer service. Their new transparency pledge made all service algorithms publicly available for independent review. An outside ethics committee with binding authority monitored all customer interaction policies. The Passenger Equality Program established compensation for past discrimination victims through a $300 million fund. More than 2,300 former passengers had received settlements, with additional claims still being processed. Jamila and Marcus had both grown professionally through the experience. Jamila established the Medical Equity Initiative, dedicated to addressing racial disparities in healthcare. Using her first-hand knowledge of discrimination, she created training programs for healthcare providers that were being adopted by major hospital systems nationwide. Marcus had founded the Algorithm Accountability Project at Stanford Law School, bringing together legal experts and computer scientists to identify and challenge discriminatory practices hidden in automated systems. His work had already influenced pending legislation on algorithmic transparency. The case's impact extended far beyond one airline. The entire industry had implemented preemptive reforms, recognizing that similar practices could expose them to comparable legal and financial consequences. Consumer advocacy groups reported significant improvements in treatment of minority passengers across all major carriers. Heather Wilson had been sentenced to 5 years in federal prison for witness tampering, evidence destruction, and conspiracy charges. Several Sky Nation executives faced ongoing criminal investigations, with indictments expected within weeks. The case had sparked national conversation about hidden discrimination, bias encoded into algorithms and systems where responsibility could be diffused and denied. Congress held hearings on algorithmic accountability, with both Jamila and Marcus providing expert testimony. New whistleblower protection laws had been proposed based on the case, with bipartisan support for stronger safeguards for employees who exposed corporate wrongdoing. The Sky Nation standards became shorthand for corporate transparency requirements. For the Greene family, the ordeal had strengthened already close bonds. Working together through danger and public scrutiny had revealed new dimensions of each other's character and resilience. On a quiet evening at their family home, as they celebrated the 1-year anniversary of Richard's birthday, the trip they had originally planned when the incident occurred, They finally had time to reflect on the journey. "I never imagined my birthday surprise would change an entire industry," Richard said, his expression thoughtful as he sipped his drink. "Neither did we," Jamila laughed. "We just wanted to visit you in New York." "I've been meaning to ask," Marcus said, turning to his father. "You moved so quickly when this happened. The attorneys, the strategy, everything. Almost like you were prepared for something like this." Richard was silent for a long moment. "I was," he finally admitted. "In fact, in some ways, I've been preparing for decades." His children exchanged confused glances. "There's something I never told you about why I invested in Sky Nation in the first place," Richard continued. "It wasn't a random business decision." He retrieved an old photograph from his desk drawer and handed it to his children. It showed a much younger Richard in a maintenance uniform, standing beside a Sky Nation aircraft. 30 years ago, I worked as an aircraft technician for Sky Nation, trying to earn money for college," he explained. "I was one of the few black employees in the maintenance division. Despite having the highest technical scores, I was repeatedly passed over for promotion." His children listened in stunned silence as Richard revealed a past they'd never known. "The final straw came when I developed a fuel efficiency improvement that saved the airline millions. My white supervisor took credit for it and received a massive bonus. When I complained, I was fired on manufactured grounds." Richard paused, the memory still painful decades later. "I promised myself then that someday I would own enough of that company to ensure no one else experienced what I did. I built Green Tech with that goal always in the background." "So when we called you from the airport," Jamila began. "It wasn't just about my children being mistreated, though that would have been enough," Richard finished. "It was the culmination of a 30-year journey toward justice, not just for me, but for everyone who's ever been treated as less than because of who they are." Marcus shook his head in amazement. "You never told us." "I wanted you to form your own identities, not be shaped by my experiences," Richard explained. "But when you called, I knew the moment had arrived, not just to protect my children, but to finally transform a system that damages countless lives." As night fell, the three Greens sat together, their individual fights for justice now revealed as threads in a much longer story, one that had transformed not just an airline but an industry, not just a company but a culture. Their stand against discrimination at a boarding gate had never been merely about first-class seats or one family's humiliation. It had been about creating a world where no one would be told to get lost because of who they were, regardless of whether their father was a CEO. The Greene family's story reveals powerful truths about confronting discrimination in modern America. First, it shows that racism doesn't disappear with wealth or education. It merely transforms. Jamila and Marcus experienced discrimination, despite their privileged background, demonstrating how deeply ingrained racial bias remains in our institutions. Second, the story highlights how discrimination has evolved from overtly racist policies to coded algorithms and neutral procedures that produce the same discriminatory outcomes while maintaining plausible deniability. Today's racism often hides behind technology and corporate policies, making it harder to identify but no less harmful. Third, it demonstrates the critical importance of documentation and evidence. Marcus's decision to record interactions, gather documents, and build a case made the difference between being dismissed as playing the race card and exposing systematic wrongdoing. Perhaps most importantly, this story teaches us about intergenerational justice. Richard's decades-long strategy shows how fighting discrimination isn't always about immediate victories, but sometimes requires patient, strategic work across years or even generations. His decision to build power specifically to create change represents a profound approach to addressing systemic problems. Finally, the story reminds us that behind every policy, algorithm, or corporate decision are real people making choices. Change happens not just through lawsuits and regulations, but when individuals choose to stand for justice, even when doing so involves personal risk. True transformation requires both systemic change and individual courage. What discrimination have you witnessed or experienced in seemingly professional environments? Have you ever had to document unfair treatment to be believed? Comment below with your thoughts. If you believe in holding corporations accountable for discrimination, hit that like button and subscribe for more powerful stories of justice. Share this video with someone who needs to understand how modern discrimination works. Thank you for joining me today. May we all find the courage to stand against injustice, whether we have privilege or not.